There is a moment in every man's life when he is pushed into a personal wilderness, not the wilderness of trees and cliffs, but the wilderness of losing what once felt secure. Musashi knew this terrain well. He wandered through mountains with nothing but the blade at his side and the instincts in his chest. No comfort, no company, no applause from the world he had left behind. Every morning he woke to the cold breath of the earth, a reminder that comfort is a luxury and presence is a necessity. Alone in that vastness, he learned to see himself without fog, without illusion. Loneliness is a wilderness. It strips you down to your core. It reveals how much of your confidence depended on people, how much of your identity leaned on approval, how much of your strength was borrowed from the noise around you. And when life tears those things away through heartbreak, rejection, distance, betrayal, it feels like exile, a forced separation, a rupture. But beneath that pain, something ancient stirs. The wilderness removes all the decorations a man hides behind. The cold wind of solitude blows through your mind like winter moving through an old forest. Weak branches snap, dead leaves scatter. What remains is the trunk, the part of you that can't be faked, the part that doesn't fall when life storms against it. Loneliness, in its harsh honesty, clears away everything you never needed. There are moments when you lose people you thought were permanent, moments when the life you built collapses in your hands, moments when the world that once felt warm becomes unrecognizable. And though you may not say it out loud, a quiet question rises from inside. Who am I without them? That question is not a curse. It is a compass, a blade pointing toward your true north. Musashi understood this. Strength is not built by holding on. It is built by surviving what is taken away. When you are left alone, with only yourself to carry, you begin to see which parts of you were real and which were borrowed. And in that moment, stripped of everything unnecessary, you finally meet the man beneath the ruins, a man who is smaller than you hoped, but far stronger than you realized. There is a certain kind of silence that unnerves weak men, not the simple absence of sound, but the deeper quiet that follows a life falling apart. Musashi believed that the world's greatest lessons do not shout, they whisper. They hide themselves in stillness, in the slow rhythm of breath, in the spaces between your thoughts. When you no longer have people around you to distract you, silence walks in like an old instructor and takes its place on the floor. You resist at first. You want noise. You want escape. But silence is patient. It waits. And when you finally stop fighting, it begins to teach. In solitude, every still moment becomes a do. Your mind becomes the floor where discipline is practiced. Your emotions become the weights you must learn to lift. Your impulses become the opponents you must learn to counter. Silence trains you in ways noise never could. It reveals how easily your attention breaks, how quickly your emotions react, how unsteady your inner balance really is. And the more you sit with it, the more you realize endurance is not built in chaos. It is built in quiet. Modern life fears quiet. Men fill every gap with distraction, terrified of being alone with the truth. But the rare man, the warrior, turns silence into fuel. He listens to it the way Musashi listened to the wind, aware that each shift, each whisper, carries meaning. In silence, you begin to hear the things you've ignored, the fatigue under your ambition, the longing beneath your anger, the truth behind your excuses. Silence becomes writing the first lines of wisdom into your character. It teaches you to listen not to voices outside, but to the voice rising from within. And in that voice, you find clarity, you find direction, you find answers that noise could never give. Loneliness becomes your instructor, silence becomes your scripture, and you begin to understand, strength is not the man who speaks the loudest. Strength is the man who listens deepest. A man's true character is forged in the hours no one else will ever see. Musashi trained in forests and fields where not a single soul witnessed his discipline. No applause, no praise, no audience waiting to be impressed. Only the raw tension of a man testing his limits under the silent gaze of dawn. In that isolation, every movement mattered. Every flaw was exposed. Every weakness echoed louder than any victory. When no one is watching, the mask falls away, and all that remains is the honesty of effort. Loneliness peels away the performance layer most men depend on. It removes the version of you built for display, the version polished for approval. Alone, you cannot pretend. Alone, you cannot hide behind confidence borrowed from company. A man alone is a blade cooling in darkness unseen, but gaining its true edge. That quiet sharpening, invisible to the world, becomes the foundation of every strength others will later mistake for talent. Solitude has a strange way of forcing clarity. In it, you see your flaws without distortion. You see your desires without manipulation. You begin to understand why you've failed certain battles and why you've avoided others. You see the parts of you that break too easily and the parts that endure without recognition. And though the truth is uncomfortable, it is liberating, because once you see yourself clearly, you can shape yourself deliberately. This is the transformation loneliness offers, the kind few willingly accept. To sit in silence and confront your real self. To study your own mind the way Musashi studied the enemy's stance. To move through your weaknesses instead of running from them. In the absence of witnesses, you learn to respect yourself or to rebuild yourself until you can. The man who can stand alone becomes a man who does not collapse when others leave. A man who does not crumble under rejection. A man who does not need validation to act. Loneliness becomes the crucible in which self-reliance is born, refined and hardened, and in that crucible, you become someone rare in this world, a man who knows who he is without anyone else's permission. Asterisk. There comes a moment when the weight you once begged others to help you carry becomes the very weight that builds your spine. Musashi's life is proof. A man who can walk alone can walk anywhere. He did not wait for support, sympathy, or guidance. He moved forward with the silent confidence of someone who understood that the earth beneath his feet was enough. When you stop needing others to hold you up, your steps finally become your own. Most men spend their lives leaning on relationships, on friends, on approval, on routine. They fear the collapse of those supports more than they feared their own stagnation. But loneliness melts dependency the way heat melts metal. It strips away the idea that someone else will save you. It challenges you to stand with the weight of your own past, your own failures, your own responsibilities. And when you accept that weight, something shifts. Your posture straightens. Your breath deepens. Your spirit anchors itself. Loneliness is a forge. Inside it, the soft parts of you burn away. The weak assumptions, the childish expectations, the hope that others will carry your burdens for you. What remains is a self that is dense, grounded, uncompromising. A self that trusts its own strength. And the moment you trust your own strength, you stop fearing loss. You stop fearing abandonment. You stop fearing the silence. Because a man who can endure his own weight cannot be broken by the absence of others. As you learn to carry yourself, a quiet pride grows. Not the loud pride of ego, but the steady pride of knowing you no longer need permission to exist. You no longer wait for someone to tell you what you're worth. You no longer depend on company to soothe the storms inside you. You become a foundation rather than a burden. And once you become your own foundation, loneliness changes its shape. It stops feeling like exile. It becomes space. It becomes choice. It becomes strength. And in that strength, you realize, a man who can stand alone does not walk into the world hoping to be held. He walks into the world ready to build. There is a transformation that only solitude can forge. Musashi emerged from his long periods of isolation, not as a hermit, but as a man sharpened by silence. He walked back into the world without the fragile edges most men possess. He was not seeking approval, comfort, or belonging. He carried himself with the calm certainty of someone who had already fought the hardest battle, the battle within. Loneliness had carved him into something steadier, colder, clearer. This is the paradox men forget. True loneliness doesn't end in isolation. It ends in strength. When you face yourself fully, your chaos, your fears, your unfiltered truth, you return to society with a different posture. You no longer cling, you no longer chase, you no longer shapeshift to fit into places that diminish you. You walk with the quiet gravity of someone who has nothing to prove, and the world feels that. People sense it. They move differently around you. Imagine a blade drawn from the fire, shaped by heat and cooled in silence. It does not announce its sharpness, it simply carries it. That is the man who has endured his own solitude. He becomes difficult to manipulate, difficult to break, difficult to distract, because the world cannot shake. A man who has survived the absence of the world. There is a difference between men who fear being alone and men who have conquered it. The first sees solitude as emptiness. The second sees it as power. You become the latter the moment you realize that loneliness is not punishment, it's initiation, a rite all strong men walk through, whether they choose it or whether life chooses it for them. And when you emerge, you walk differently, you speak differently, you choose differently. You stand in rooms without needing to be seen. You enter relationships without begging to be held. You move through life without the tremors of insecurity. You return sharper than you left. Not harder, just whole. Loneliness was never your enemy. It was the gatekeeper. And the man who walks through its gates becomes someone the noisy world